Why isn't this pushing out? What the heck is an electrolytic separator? What is even going on? Why won't you just put the output the hydrogen? Why is there so many steps? If you're like me, you took one glance at Mekanism and wondered how is anyone supposed to figure out what to do or even where to start. However, after a little bit of experimenting and taking the massive task of multiplying your ores by 5 times, it doesn't have to be as daunting or scary as it first seems. Something to note as I explain how this all works is that there's a flowchart on the corner of the screen to help guide where we are in the process, as well as color codings to show what chunk of the process we are at. Not a Minecraft chunk. You should take big problems like this and make the problem into smaller, manageable chunks so you're not overwhelmed. We will start with the Energized Smelter. This machine is as basic as a regular Minecraft furnace, with the added benefits to make it faster and cook more than one ore at once, while also using no fuel to cook them. Next up is doubling your ore with the Enrichment Chamber. This takes your ore and turns it into dust, which then smelts it and doubles the ore. I wouldn't recommend stopping here, as with just a little bit more resources, you can get significantly more ore yield with the next machines. The crusher turns your ore into dirty dust, which then goes into the enrichment chamber, and finally the smelter for a 3 times ore yield. However, we can push this even further with a purification chamber. But wait, we got a little snag here. We need oxygen to turn this ore into clumps, but how do we accomplish this? We first need a water source, so grab your electric pump, or what I prefer is the blockhead's kitchen sink, hook that up with a mechanical pipe. This allows the fluid to travel into the electrolytic separator. Then you connect the electrolytic separator to the purification chamber. This gives a 3 times ore yield, but we can take this even further using a chemical injection chamber. The chemical injection chamber needs a new gas to operate, hydrogen chloride. You need this to hook the machine up to a chemical infuser and take the hydrogen from the electrolytic separator we made previously. Then we want to add the second electrolytic separator to the chemical infuser using a mechanical pipe to transfer the gas. However, we're still not done yet. We need brine to go into the electrolytic separator so we can make chlorine. We can accomplish this by making a thermal evaporation plant, a multi-block structure that needs heat and water to get it up and running. This structure needs 3 blocks, a thermal evaporation valve, a controller, and blocks. Plenty of blocks. We start by making the 4x4 base on the ground. Then we start adding a single controller and valves to input the water and heat and output the brine. Then start building up. There is a cap on how high the structure can go, and you can tell once the red particles stop spewing out to show that the structure has been completed. We then want to add the resistive heater to the valve block with power connected to it. We then want to input the water from the machine, and change the temperature of the heater a bit. The more heat you input, the more power it draws, so be careful. Then, take your mechanical pipes and connect it to the last valve to output the brine into the electrolytic separator. Make sure all the outputs and inputs on the machine are set up correctly, then you should be seeing the hydrogen chloride fill up in the chemical injection chamber. Congratulations! You are now making shards and have a 4 times ore yield. Ensure that all the machines that you see here are connected one after another. If you stop here, I wouldn't blame you. The next steps to get 5 times ore yield is a little daunting, but can be done. Let's start by making the chemical crystallizers. I would recommend making multiple chemical crystallizers, as this is a common bottleneck to process the ores. It makes crystals from the clean ore slurry, and to make clean ore slurry, you need to make a chemical washer. Make sure to make a pump or a sink and connect the water with a mechanical pipe to the chemical washer to wash stuff. Make a chemical dissolution chamber so we can take the ores and make it into ore slurry. This is where your ores are going to be inputted for a 5 times ore yield, but in order for this machine to work, we need a lot of pre-setup. It needs sulfuric acid. We can achieve this with multiple steps. Let's start with a water pump or sink and connect to a rotary condensator. This turns the water into water vapor, and the water vapor gets pushed into the chemical infuser. let's turn our attention to the electrolytic separator. This, like what came before, needs water to make hydrogen and oxygen. We want to push the oxygen into a chemical infuser. This also connects it to the chemical infuser to make sulfur trioxide. Let's now make a chemical oxidizer and connect it to the chemical infuser for the sulfur dioxide, and then make a chemical injection chamber for the sulfur, which is needed for the chemical oxidizer. You can see that all these four machines take the creation of sulfur and turn it into sulfuric acid. We now need to visit our old friend, the blue chunk. You can see how the process for hydrogen chloride is the same. We can take the pipe for the chlorine and move it all the way up, put just one more chemical infuser, take the hydrogen from the electrolytic separator, connect it to the chemical infuser along with the chlorine, and BAM! The hard, confusing work is done. Now for the chemical injection chamber. A creeper farm can be used to put gunpowder into it to make sulfur, or alternatively, can make a pressurized reaction chamber and feed coal into it to make sulfur, and direct that into the chemical oxidizer. After all of that, the process goes from the chemical injection chamber, which makes ore slurry. The ore slurry goes into the chemical washer and washes it into clean ore slurry, then gets pushed into the chemical crystallizer and turns it into crystals, feeding the crystals into the chemical injection chamber to make shards. Shards go into the purification chamber to make clumps. Clumps get clumped into the crusher, which makes dirty dust in an enrichment chamber to get regular dust, and finally dust in an energized smelter to make the final ingot. From 1 stack of ingots to 5 stacks. Make sure your input and outputs on your machines are correct and that they are pulling with the configurator, and enjoy the riches.